this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this adorable bunny cake. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. If you want to skip the intro and get right into the video, there are chapters linked below. And before we get started, I'm filming this again because I whitened my teeth this morning. And I feel like Ross from Friends. You ever see that episode where he whitens his teeth? But the ring light is like glowing on my bottom tooth and it's hysterical. So if it's still happening, whatever. I'm just trying to get my teeth a little whiter. But anyway, I'm going to show you how to decorate this adorable bunny cake. And I am starting with my cake already baked, filled, iced, and it is in the refrigerator waiting to be decorated. And I have videos showing you how I bake, fill, ice, refrigerate cakes, make the icing, make the fondant. All of that is going to be linked in the description. And I will also link below the tools that I use and the pictures that I use. And I will also let you know how much I charge for this cake. So let's get started. All right, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I have Gum-Tex powder, Tylose powder, CMC powder. It's all basically the same thing. It's mixed into all of my fondant. I only use marshmallow fondant, and it's going to help the fondant set a little harder, and it's going to be so much easier to work with. I will link this in the description. I have a piece of non-slip pad under my cutting board so it doesn't slide around, an X-Acto knife with a wet paper towel, a Dresden tool, and a little bit of water, and my fingers are stained. They're not dirty. They're just stained from edible ink. So I have this bunny. I made this cake before, and I could not find the bunny for the life of me, so I had to blow up that picture. I'll have a clearer picture for you linked in the description. I measured the top of my cake, and I printed that out the size I wanted to be. I have really thin white fondant here, and I'm using my trace, cut, and smooth method on here, and I'm just tracing all the white pieces onto this fondant. So I just want to make sure I'm pressing hard enough to transfer the line onto the fondant. Don't forget the little eyes and the nose. I don't want to press too hard because I don't want to poke a hole in the fondant. Peel it back, make sure you can see it. And now, like always, I'm cutting all the center pieces out first and smoothing those. Just trust me, it's a lot easier to cut the center pieces out before you cut the bigger pieces out of fondant. And now when I'm doing this, you see how I'm cutting to the inside of that line? And like I'm kind of cutting around that line because I want a black border around there. It'll make sense as I put it together, but I don't want to cut on the line with the arms and the belly. And anytime I cut anything out of fondant, I'm going to take my time and smooth my cuts so the edges don't look jagged. Now I rolled out this black fondant about a ½ inch thick. It does have that Tylose powder mixed in. And I just want to put all these pieces on here first to get them in the right position before I glue them down with water. And now I'm going to flip the face upside down, get a little water on the back. Make sure you don't get too much water. You don't want it to seep out the sides. And I'm gently laying that down, and I'm using my tools to get it in the right shape because it didn't look very symmetrical when I first put it down. And again, I'm just getting some water behind the back. Do you see why I cut around that line for the arms and the belly? That way there's like a black line in between. So I'm just, as I'm putting these pieces down, I'm making sure that there's a little black border in between all the pieces. Good, now I have some thin pink fondant and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to trace the inside of the ears and the feet and then cut these out, smooth my cuts. Then I'm going to get a little bit of water behind each of the pink pieces and stick them down. And now I have a black edible marker. So I gently am writing on here. I'm not pushing very hard. Do you see how I'm using a light touch and I'm turning it around, you know, just trying to get a very sharp line on here. I'm using the fine end of that marker and I'm just kind of rotating it in the eye sockets to get the little eyeballs there. And now whenever I cut anything out of thicker fondant, I like to make a guide line first. So I'm just sticking the very tip of my X-Acto knife down into the fondant just to get a line. And then once I have that outline finished, I'm going to stick the tip all the way down to the cutting board and cut this out using that line as a guide. That way I'm not going to mess up the fondant. And when I get into these little crevices, do you see how I'm like trying to peel the fondant away so I don't ruin the piece? Good, and when that's done, it looks horrible. It's very jagged, so what I like to do is flip it over, use my fingers, use my tools, and smooth the edges from the back, and then flip it over and smooth it from the front. So I'm really just pressing the fondant back down on itself so there's no jagged edges. And then I want to stick a skewer in the bottom. I'm going to screw it in where it's going to touch the cake, and I'm going to keep flipping it over, making sure that it's not poking out through the front or the back. And that looks good. Let's set that aside. Now I'm making the number 1. I printed this out the size I wanted it to be, and I rolled out this yellow fondant really thin, and I have this strip cutter, and I'm going to cut little strips of fondant. What I like to do is flip it over and use something to really press the fondant down onto that strip cutter so it really gives clean cuts. So you can use like a rolling pin, or I use that like marker, and I use my hands to really smooth it out, tap it out, and it comes out. So I have 6 different colors, and I'm doing the same process for all 6 colors. Now this easily removes because I have Tylose powder in that fondant. Sometimes it sticks like I'm showing you here. If it does, you could just carefully peel it out, use some tools to release it from that strip cutter. Now I have a thin piece of white fondant, and I'm going to roughly just outline this number 1 so I know where I have to put the stripes. And then I want to get water on this entire thing. Now I don't want to have too much water, but not too little, just enough so these stripes can stick to it. And I'm going to just alternate colors, starting with purple, and then I'm lining up the next color right underneath it. And you see how I'm pushing it up against the color above it to make sure that there's no white showing through. And once I do all the colors, I'm going to start all over again with the purple and repeat it until I get the entire thing done. And now I want to cut this number 1, or trace the number 1 on here. But I can't trace it like I normally do because I'm going to drag those stripes. So what I need to do instead, when I have stripes like this, and you want to make sure that you have it on straight if you want your stripes to be straight. If you want them on an angle, then you put it on an angle. But I'm using this little needle tool to poke a little dotted line around the entire thing. So that's what I'm using as my guide. And again, I can't drag the X-Acto knife. You saw how it dragged the stripes. So I'm doing like that shallow cut like I did before on that thicker fondant. And once I have the shallow cut, then I'm cutting the entire thing out. Get a little bit of water on the back. I have a thin piece of black fondant, and I'm going to put that down on top of that. And then I'm going to cut a thin black border around the entire number. And once that's done, I'm going to smooth out any jagged edges. Realign that back on the picture, and let's set that aside. Now I'm making the border, so let's roll this into a log, flatten it out, sprinkle down some cornstarch, and roll it out really long. I have this ribbon cutter, and I'm just making it however wide I want it to be. I'll link that below. Cut the strip, and then I'm going to use my rulers to straighten it out. I want to make the polka dots, so I have this number 809 piping tip, and I'm just cutting a bunch of little circles out in all the colors. And I like to cut some of them in half, and I will show you why. Now I got this cake out of the fridge. The icing is solid, so I'm not going to mess it up. I'm going to mark the front of my cake. The front of the cake is whatever looks most symmetrical. I'm going to use a wet paper towel to just remove that excess icing that's on the board. And I'm getting a little bit of piping gel around the bottom perimeter so I can stick the border down. So I'm starting in the very back. Let's wrap it around where it meets in the back, cut it, and then I'm going to press that seam together and use my palette knife just to press that down so it's touching the cake board and everything is even. Now I'm just using a dry brush to get rid of that excess cornstarch, get some piping gel behind the number 1, and let's stick that on the front of the cake.
And now I'm doing the little polka dots. So I'm getting border behind here. And do you see how I stick the little halvesies at the very top and at the very bottom? And then I do some whole ones. And I don't like to have the same color next to each other because I'm crazy like that. So I do like the halves at the top and the bottom. And then I just try to pay attention to what colors I'm sticking down. And I go to the back. And once I get to the back, I start at the front and go back the other side. And there's all the polka dots. Now I'm making little curlies, so I cut a straight line and then a squiggly line on either side so all of the curlies come to a little point. I'm going to do this for all the colors, and I'm going to wrap a little strip around my Dresden tool. And there you have your curlies. I'm getting a toothpick in the bottom of that bunny so it doesn't twist when I put it in the cake. And I'm using the same color icing that it's going to be touching on the very bottom, and I'm going to slide that down onto the cake. I've got to shift that over left, it wasn't center. And then I'm going to use a dry paintbrush and wipe that into a paper towel just to get rid of any icing that's showing through the bottom. And I'm going to get some piping gel and get that underneath each of the little curlies that I stick down. And I'm getting a little bit of non-toxic glue around the perimeter of the board and the back of the ribbon and wrapping that around the board, pressing it down for good measure. And here is the cake. So cute.
So there you go. How adorable is this cake? And I just wanted to say something to you guys real quick. When you get a request for a common theme like this, like a bunny cake, do you automatically try to just do the one with the ears on the top and the face on the front? And while that's a cute design, it's just a little trite, meaning it is overused and lacks a little creativity. So I challenge you to think outside of the box when you get a request for a common theme to come up with something a little different. Now, a lot of people ask me how I come up with my designs, and I'm trying to think of a way to relay this information to you guys. So once I do, I will let you guys know, and I'll put out a video or whatnot. Or whatnot. You know what I mean. Anyway, this cake is a 6-inch cake, and it is 2 layers torted. And I get a lot of people asking me, what does torted mean? It's when you cut a cake in half lengthwise to get thinner layers. And I usually make 2 layers torted for most of my cakes. I do have, if I try to get different heights and servings out of a cake, I will mess around with torting and not torting and adding layers. And I have a video talking about that, and I will link that in the description. But anyway, this cake is 2 layers torted, 6-inch cake, and it feeds about 12 to 15 people. How much would you guys charge if you made this cake? I charged $225, and I probably would have charged like $250. However, she got 2 cakes together this week and 1 for the following week, so I gave her a little bit of a discount. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? Leave them in the comments below. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you are enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is pinned in the comments below. Please like this video if you liked it. I already said that. And you can keep in touch on socials and check out my website. Everything is listed in the description. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.